Oh yeah. Okay. Nice little 3-point, but holy cow, look how tall that brow tine is. Dude, I think this is it. Here we go. I'd taken the shot just after first light on my first hunt of early archery season. He and 2 other smaller bucks had stepped out in the darkness at a mere 20 yards, a thick-bodied whitetail with a pretty unique rack, tall brow tines and some weird junk at the base. The kind that won't really win you any awards, but certainly gets your heart racing. After an unsuccessful 2023 season, I promised myself that I would not hesitate at the first decent buck that I saw. And for the small property that I hunt in Northeast Indiana, he was definitely decent. When I squeezed my crossbow trigger, I knew that I'd nailed him. It was a tough shot as only his front third was visible and quartering toward me. And I thought I had enough room to kind of slide the arrow right into his vitals between his front leg and the tree that the rest of his body was hiding behind. But he kicked and he bolted and he disappeared over the ridge. I waited an hour before getting down, checked the side of the shot, found no arrow, but saw a heavy line of blood. After following it for 80 yards, I decided to back out and just let him fade. I went into town, grabbed a coffee, waited 3 more hours, and headed back out with my nephew, thinking that the initial blood trail was thick enough to find a dead deer after 4 hours of waiting. The blood trail was heavy and constant. Splatters on the sides of trees, dying leaves dyed red. Really one of the easier tracks I've ever been on. I was excited to take my nephew along to see the whole process, his first ever track, hoping that we'd have heavy blood that ultimately led to a dead deer. It was a cool, gray October afternoon and the wind had died down, leaving only the sound of conversation and our boots crunching on the forest floor. We had been tracking for 4 hours, weaving through thick timber, my heart pounding with every single step. We tracked and tracked and tracked, and over a mile away and 8 hours after the shot, we found a single broadhead along the blood trail. Still no arrow, just a random broadhead that had magically untwisted its entire half-inch from its bolt. It was the exact kind that I used, but I didn't even think it was mine because that's just weird, right? Like, how does a broadhead completely unthread itself from the arrow, and why? So, of course, after finding this, the blood trail started to get sparse, and we were hungry for dinner. And despite hours of searching, we left the woods. After dinner, my wife and I continued the search. 12 hours had now passed, and again, I was excited about the prospect of my wife seeing me get my hands on this buck. I mean, isn't that what every man dreams of, just to slay the beast in front of their queen? My dad joined us an hour later, and we combed the area looking for drops of blood, disturbed leaves, or a dead body. We circled, we fanned, we grid searched, we got on our hands and knees in the pitch black and looked closely at the ground with our flashlights. And there was nothing. Nothing but this empty feeling in my chest, that kind that lingers longer than you'd like to admit. We left the woods with one last idea in mind. I was desperate and I wanted to be able to say that I exhausted every single effort before ultimately giving up. I'd never done this before, never actually needed to, but we actually hired a drone recovery service. 15 hours had now passed and Mike arrived at 10:30 p.m. with his drone. We threw it up in the air, scanned the entire woods and fields, and located several lone does and raccoons before eventually finding him. Laying down with a gaping entry hole and an arrow with no broadhead at the tip sticking out of his left side. And the worst part, he was still alive. And by law, Mike couldn't tell me the exact coordinates and we couldn't retrieve him, so I went to bed that night with great relief, knowing that we had found him and that he would likely expire overnight, and I'd finally be able to put an end to this chase in the morning. The next morning, Mike came back out, threw up the drone again, went straight back to the location that we had last seen him, and sure enough, he was there. And what an incredible feeling. But as we zoomed in on him, his head was up and he was alert. 27 hours had now passed. He had been bedded down in the same spot for who knows how long, and he was still alive. I hated that he was suffering, and I hated the law that was preventing me from knowing his exact location to just put him out of his misery. So I waited some more. I decided that since he had stayed there all night, injured with miles of blood loss, that he would have to expire sometime that day or that night, and I would just go to that general location the next morning. After yet another long day and a sleepless night, I took my first ever personal day from work and went out 51 hours post-shot, completely expecting to finally get my hands on this guy. But instead of finding a body or a big blood spot where he'd been laying for days, I found fresh tire tracks. So one of two things had to have happened. Someone either had taken him or their side-by-side had spooked him. And with either option, there was little hope of ever finding him. He was either hanging in someone's barn or dead in a completely different location, well off property in who knows what direction. So I pulled out, replaying every single mistake that I had made. I should have waited until more of his body was exposed, or maybe waited until it was a little bit lighter out. I should have been more patient. I should have waited longer to get down, or even longer to get back out. It was just this constant game of woulda, shoulda, coulda, and it sucked for days. Fast forward 4 months. The deer season's over. I tagged out with a doe and a decent 8. Our freezer was plenty full, and it was, by all measures, a successful season. And now my second favorite season was upon us. February 1st had hit, the snow was starting to melt. It was a perfect day to just walk the woods. I was out shed hunting, mostly for the sake of getting outside and enjoying God's creation. But the sting of losing that buck still lingered. But time had obviously softened it. Been seeing a lot of people picking up antlers on social media recently, and I have a rule that I cannot start looking for sheds until February. Well, today's February 1st, and I can't wait any longer, so I'm here at my in-laws. We have a log cabin out here in northern Indiana, searching for some antlers. They have a 16-acre property, but I also have permission to hunt the east property as well, which is, several dozen acres. So we're gonna try to figure out if there's some antlers laying on the ground somewhere. We've got some big bucks on this property, and so hoping to find some of their sheds. So here we go. I started in the backyard, zigzagging through the field and woods, walking a familiar ridge, scanning the ground, and I made my way back to that northeast corner where I had taken that early bow season shot 4 months prior, when something caught my eye. It's a little deer trail right here. It's not bad. Wait a minute. Here we go. Found one. Perched right on top of the last inch of snow, 80 yards from the stand, was a single antler. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, tracing the thick base and tall brow tine. This was definitely the biggest 3-point shed that I had ever seen. And my first thought was that I couldn't wait to see what his genes would do to him this next season. Thick, just a thick 3-point right there. Beautiful, nice. First one on the board, baby. I walked another 4 hours, jumping several different herds of deer and finding nothing else but a doe skull. It wasn't until I walked into the garage that it dawned on me. This was his. Dude, I think this is it. Look at the brow tine, look how tall that is. The curved in G2, which is super long. This weird crap at the base that broke off. What? Okay, first of all, check out the triangle shape that it creates between the brow tine and the G2. Check out the triangle shape that it creates between the brow tine and the G2. And when I overlay it, it's an exact match. And again, right here at the base of the brow, that was all chewed off or broken off, but there was a bunch of junk there, and even on the shed, there was a bunch of excess junk there too. It's crazy because I live an hour and a half away from here, and we had no snow at all. and plenty of snow out here in the woods. Obviously, temperatures are cooler in the woods, but that makes this a lot more difficult to see white things that are laying on the ground. So we're gonna trump through this woods here and see if we can find something. But holy moly, this is gonna be quite the challenge. It's very clearly a heavy deer trail. The old fork in the road. It's the hardest part about shed hunting is, which track do I follow? Follow both. Well, just got back from a 4-hour, 6.2 mile walk through the woods and the fields, looking for sheds, and of course I found absolutely nothing. And that's okay, because today I got to be in solitude, I got to pray, I got to meditate, I got to process a lot of stuff that's going on in life right now. I got to be in God's creation, and quite honestly, that's a win no matter how you slice it, man. That's a great, great day. A close second to that, though, is when you get a phone call from the neighbor who hunts to the northwest of you, who says he found a shed that might be of importance to me. Turns out, he's right. This shed is very important to me. It is the right side of the buck that I shot back in October, a matching set of the one that I found about 3 weeks ago. This dude is out there, he's roaming the land. This was found about a mile away near the cemetery. Look at the brow tine, look at the G2, the curved G2. This is a beautiful, beautiful shed. I'm so happy that I have it. I can't believe we found the matching set. He's home, and that's pretty awesome. I cannot wait to hunt this guy in the fall. He was alive because he's one of the toughest species of animal on the planet. And I stood there for a long time, just holding that antler like it was some kind of answer. And sometimes the woods don't give you the ending you want, but they always leave you with a good story.